If you have a pension and $1 million or more, then we're going to talk about something today called the tax diversification of your investments. And so you've always heard of investment diversification. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. But what about taxes? And so we're going to be talking about the three buckets: tax deferred, tax free, and the taxable bucket. And we're going to break down each of those and help you decide which of these buckets should you be allocating your money towards as you're reaching retirement, or maybe you are already in retirement. And so we're going to help you plan for it as you move forward into retirement. So that's what we have on today's episode of Joe Knows Retirement.
Joe knows taxes.
Joe knows the market.
Joe knows Social Security.
Joe knows income planning.
Joe knows pickleball? No.
This is Joe Knows Retirement.
So my name's Joe Schmitz. I'm the CEO and founder of Peak Retirement Planning. I absolutely love making these videos here for the Joe Knows Retirement YouTube channel here. We have a lot of fun with it, and so my encouragement is it can be helpful for you all here. And so we talk about the 2% Club often on this YouTube channel, and that's those people with a pension, which is less than 20% of people, and those with $1 million or more, which is 10% or less of people as well. And so if you find you in both of those categories, you're in a unique situation. You're amongst the 2% if you combine those two percentages. And so your planning is a little more unique. There's a little more to understand. And so you're going to see in our conversations here today that we're going to be talking with those with a higher income, which is pensions, and how this tax buckets are going to play a part for them. So if you don't have a pension, understand your planning may be different, and the allocation towards these buckets may be different as well. So we're particularly going to be talking to those with a pension over $1 million in this video. And if that's speaking to you and that's the type of person you are, feel free to subscribe. We always get tons of viewers on this channel who schedule time to talk to us and look to work with our team, who basically say, I feel like you're talking just to me in these YouTube channels. And that's what we talk about. And I wrote a book called The Midwestern Millionaire that talks about this concept as well. And this is the hardworking people have lived a life of service. Typically, if you have a pension, you've typically worked at a company for a long time, you've been very loyal, and you found yourself being a diligent saver and now having a lot more opportunities to give, gift, or spend your money in retirement. And so we like to help people plan for that, because obviously at this point they may not be worried about running out of money. They just want to make sure that they can live out their dreams and leave a legacy behind and give to those that their loved ones, or maybe a charity that's endear to their heart. And so today's video, as we talk about tax diversification, let's first start off by breaking down the three buckets here that you can put your investments into. And so we all know the tax deferred bucket. That's going to be your 401ks, your IRAs, your 403bs, your TSP, your 457. If you take a lump sum option of your pension or a partial lump sum option of your pension, that can be moved into the tax deferred side of things. And so with the tax deferred side of things, as we know, you cannot take out the money tax free. If you take it out, you're going to have to pay taxes. So the way it obviously works is you put in $10,000 up front and you get a tax deduction, you get a savings today, which that's good news. Everyone likes that. But as this 10,000 grows to 100,000, and when you take out 100,000 in retirement, now you have to pay taxes on that full $100,000. And so ultimately, you have to ask yourself, would you rather pay taxes on $10,000 or $100,000? Is how it works with the tax deferred bucket here. And so with the tax deferred, that's where most people have all their assets, because obviously that's what you've been doing all your life with these retirement accounts that your employer is offering you. And so at this point, most people we see have a lot of money in this tax deferred vehicle and very little in the other two buckets we're going to talk about. Now, that could be a negative in today's day and age with tax rates as low as they are. And so, back then though, when you did the tax deferred investment, maybe that was a great opportunity. And so if you look at the history of tax rates and you look at where we're going from tax rates moving forward, let's just really talk about this concept. And so if you look at the history of tax rates, the highest rate of all time was 94%, was the highest marginal tax bracket back in after World War I. Whereas today, it's only 37%. So you can see historically low right now from a tax rate standpoint. But let's say back in 1981, let's say you were contributing to a 401k. Well, the highest tax bracket at that point was 70%. So at that point, it probably made sense to do the tax deferred investment because you got a tax deduction at that amount. Now, the question that we always want to pose to people, though, is, you made the right decision deferring at 70%, because you could pay it now at 37. But my question to you is are we doing anything about it currently, or are we just sitting here waiting for the future to pay our taxes? Because as we all know, with the tax-deferred investment, there's something called a required minimum distribution that you're required to take out when you reach ages 73 or 75. That's going to be depending on when you're born. So if you're born in 1960 or after, your RMD age is 75. And so that's when the government forces you to take out money from these tax-deferred investments. And they're going to force you to take out about 4% when you reach that age. And then by the time you're age 90, that percentage is going to go all the way up to about 9% or even more, depending on your age. And so you can see that as your investments grow throughout retirement, so does your withdrawal rate. When those two things go up, you're going to force you to take higher amounts out of your investments, which leads to you potentially being in a higher tax bracket when you factor in your pension on top of that. And when you factor in your Social Security, which likely for those we work with is mostly always going to become 85% taxable. And so between those sources of income, most of the clients we see, most of the people we work with, they're going to be in a much higher tax bracket. Typically they're in the same tax bracket or higher than when they were working. And so, that's something you've probably heard all the time is I'm going to be in a lower tax bracket in retirement. And that is true for about 50% of people out there. There's certainly, most people are lower income, and there's something called the standard deduction that if your income is $30,000 or less right now and you're a married filing jointly couple, then you don't have to pay any taxes from a federal income standpoint. And so at that point, you are going to be in a lower tax bracket. 0 versus when you're working, you're probably going to make over $30,000. But for those with pensions, typically their pension pushes them out of the $30,000 range, and it's going to start to force Social Security to now become taxable. Because remember, Social Security could be tax-free if your income is low enough, but as soon as your income creeps up, it starts to become 10%, 20%, 30%, all the way up to 85% of it could be taxable depending on where your income lies on that scale. And so that's the consideration, plus you're in higher tax brackets. And then a lot of people are worried about IRMA, which is a cost of Medicare premiums, right? Part B premiums cost more as your income rises. So you get the same healthcare coverage as everyone else, but you have to pay more just because you have a higher income. And so that's how the Part B Medicare premiums work there. And so that's something a lot of our clients that have pensions $1 million or more, they're really worried about these types of things because it can cost them a lot more in hidden costs or a lot more in hidden taxes that they weren't aware of, or maybe they weren't considering as they enter into retirement. They think that, hey, I'm in retirement now, things should slow down, taxes should go down, costs should go down, but typically, as we see, it only rises. And that's also saying we don't know also what tax rates are going to be in the future. Tax rates may go up in the future, they may go down. We have no idea. We do know the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is set to expire in 2026. That's what President Trump enacted in 2017. Although it looks like this could get extended with, basically a Republican House, Congress, and President, that could get extended. And they say it could get extended for up to another 8-10 years. No one really knows at this point, but that's something to make sure you're following and tracking, because if so, you're going to have a lot of tax planning strategies to look at over the next few years that a lot of our people in this category are going to find really helpful with their situation. But after that period of time, once the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act sunsets, tax rates will go up. And we've done analysis to see that for most people that we work with, that tax rate could go up by 20%. Not the tax rate, but the amount of taxes they pay could go up by 20%, which is going to be very, it's going to cost them a lot of money. Just because they're going to have the same income but have to pay more in taxes. So again, there's a lot of things we can look at now, which we'll get into when we talk about the tax-free and taxable bucket. But that's the main thing that we want you to understand with the tax-deferred. So obviously with the tax-deferred, again, you don't beat yourself up if you have all your money here. Most people we see when they first come see us have all their money in tax-deferred, maybe a little bit in a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k, but predominantly it's mostly in a tax-deferred. And so the question we really want to pose today on the video today is, hey, is that the right decision today? Obviously, we talked about the historical rates. We talked about the rates right now, and we talked about potentially rates going up in the future. And so you have to make the decision for you of if you think you're going to be in a lower or higher tax bracket in the future for your personal situation, and what is your personal opinion on taxes. Obviously, a lot of the experts suggest it's going to go up, and so you have to make that decision for you, and then you have to plan accordingly. So let's talk about what we could do then if we do have all of our money in tax deferred. And so we're going to talk about the next bucket here, which is simply tax-free. And so again, this is going to be most of your Roth type accounts. And so in this tax-free bucket here, you don't pay any taxes when you take the money out, but you pay when you put it in. So for example, that $10,000 example, When you put $10,000 into a Roth account, you have to pay your taxes today. So obviously no one likes that. But as this $10,000 grows to $100,000, and when you take out $100,000 in retirement, you're not going to have to worry about paying any taxes on that. All of the growth is tax-free. So I always like to use a apple seed analogy. So I'm from a small rural community here in Columbus, Ohio, just southeast of here. And, you know, my best friend is a farmer down there, and he has an apple orchard. And so I asked him, would you rather pay tax on the seed that you plant or the harvest that you reap at the end of the year? And obviously this is the same conversation with a Roth conversion, as you have the idea of, do you want to pay money on your tax-deferred investments now to move it over to the Roth? So again, Roth conversion is something that's one of the more popular tax planning strategies out there. So I definitely write that down. And a lot of this stuff that I'm talking about here is going to resonate with you. And it's one of the things that we're seeing a lot of people are not necessarily even looking at right now. Maybe other advisors just aren't really focused on the tax planning side, so they're not advising their clients. Or a lot of the DIY type people that come and see us, they just don't really know exactly what to look for when they do Roth conversions. You know, they know that there's things to worry about with Social Security taxes, Medicare premiums, capital gains. You know, they know everything plays together, but they don't really have the software to decide, is $50,000 the right to convert? Is $100,000 the right convert? They haven't really considered that thought out to see what's going to make the most over their lifetime tax bill. And so that could be some of the advantages of working with a professional who really specializes in tax planning. We always suggest you work with a team of CFPs, certified financial planners, who do the comprehensive planning, the 5 pillars that we talk about quite often on these videos. And those are they're going to, you know, not only do the tax planning throughout the year, but also look to tax prep and do your taxes at the end of the year as well, to make sure everything funnels together. It's also an advantage if they're going to collaborate with the estate planning attorney for you, and making sure that they can, you know, collaborate with the Medicare specialist, Social Security specialist, and have all of those people in one place to ensure you're truly getting the full experience, so that, you know, the one professional doesn't have to call the other, and the other one doesn't have to call the other. They can simply just walk across the office and get the help that's going to be needed for your plan. Just make sure everything's working and going in the right direction there. So that would be some of our advice there. But the Roth conversion is certainly something that we'd recommend for you to look into, especially knowing what our current environment sits here. And so a lot of you are probably thinking, you know, well, why are more people not doing the Roth if it's this advantageous with where we're at right now? And a lot of people are looking to do this right now. And so, you know, with 401ks, they're now, you know, most of them have the Roth option. Whereas if you went back a few years, a lot of 401ks didn't have Roth options. And the Roth option didn't exist in a 401k until 2006. And then the Roth IRA didn't exist until 1997. And so when you factor all that in, it makes sense why people haven't put as much into Roth, especially knowing that there's income limits. You know, you got to be aware of only being able to put so much into a Roth IRA. As a contribution. There's only so much you can put into a Roth 401k. As a contribution, you have to have earned income to be able to do a Roth IRA. So there's all these stipulations. But back to that Roth conversion, there is no considerations for that. You can you know, do as much as you want with a Roth conversion. So if you have $1 million in tax deferred, you could move that over to a Roth IRA. Obviously, there's some other things to be aware of, and I'm not saying that that's probably what you'd want to do. You'd probably want to look to do more so over time and find a strategic way to do so, to make sure that the tax you pay on that Roth conversion now, the tax rate, the all-in tax rate you pay right now, would be less than what you could pay in the future. And so that's the analysis we do for the people we work with, is what is it going to look like now? What could it look like later, to help make that decision of what's going to be best for them. So that's the idea of that Roth conversion idea, and that's why, you know, not too many people have money in a Roth. And so when it comes to these two retirement account buckets, you know, I like to use the example of, you know, should we have all of our eggs in one basket? And of course, right now, most people have all their eggs in one basket with tax deferred and vehicles, where we're challenging them and just simply asking, hey, is that the right solution, or should we have more in tax free and have more of a balance? And, you know, that balance may be different for different people. Some people may have more in tax free, others may have more in tax deferred. It's all going to depend on what your income and situation is going to look like moving forward. And I'll give you a few hints here, especially with this video being for those with pensions, is if you have a higher pension, you know, let's say you have a $60,000 a month or year pension, or $100,000 a month pension or more, it's going to start to make more sense to do a little more aggressive Roth conversions, because, you know, if you have $1 million, your RMD, your pension, your Social Security, you're probably going to bump yourself up into higher tax brackets, and that's going to make more sense to do a Roth conversion, because you could potentially do it at the lower rates now. I mean, the 24% bracket could be a reasonable bracket for a lot of the people in this category here, and that can go up all the way to $400,000 of income. And so you could probably get a good amount converted now over the next few years, depending on what the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act does, before tax rates potentially go up in the future, and the brackets could change as well. So those are the things that you just want to pay attention to, and just understand the opportunity you have right now to take advantage of those opportunities. But again, as you know, if you have a pension, your income's probably never going to be lower. You're going to have that guaranteed amount forever, bumping you up those brackets, bumping up in other costs that we mentioned there as well. So hopefully that can be helpful as you plan out to decide which of those buckets is going to make sense for you there. And then the third bucket that I want to talk about further here is the taxable bucket. And the taxable bucket can kind of be that catch-all account. It's a lot of it can be either taxed at ordinary income on the gain or capital gains, depending on how you have that invested. So some of you may have those investments in CDs or money market accounts or treasuries, or any of these type of accounts. You're going to have to pay ordinary income on the growth, which is definitely less advantageous as capital gains. And so capital gains is going to be, if you're invested in the market, let's call it like an individual stock or an ETF or an index fund or a mutual fund, those are going to grow at capital gains if they're invested in the stock market or in equities, as some people refer to it as well. And so, if you have $100,000 and it grows to, $110,000, you would have to pay typically a 15% capital gains on the gain there if you sell off that investment. Now, that percentage, that 15%, is for most people, but for some people it could be 0% actually if your income is low enough, or it could be 20% if you have an ultra high income. But most of the people we talk about with pensions find themselves in that 15%. Some of them could sneak into the 0% if they plan the right way, depending on when they retire and how much other assets they have, and how that all plays together. But the key is you just want to be aware of that. And so maybe you have a lot of money in the taxable bucket that's just sitting in your bank account. Well, maybe you reposition that protection money. Maybe you like the money market or CD, you like the protection, you like the stable over time. That's great. Maybe you look to take that money and put it in your IRA, and then take this money and put it in the equities as part of your growth portion of your portfolio, get the capital gains treatment instead of ordinary income, and then you can still get your investments out of your IRA if you need to. You're just repositioning your assets in a smarter way. Maybe a consideration for taxes as we're talking here today. But another consideration with this taxable bucket is looking to take some of these assets, and if you are still working and have an earned income and eligible for a backdoor Roth IRA, if you make too much, you could look into that, or just a simple Roth IRA contribution. You could put in $8,000 if you're over age 50 into a Roth IRA, and if you're married, you could both put in $8,000. And if you do it before the deadline of April 15th, well, then you could actually do $8,000 for 2024 and $8,000 for 2025 for a grand total of $32,000 if you are a married couple. And so that could be a way you could take this money that grows as a tax, capital gains or ordinary income, move into a Roth IRA, and get the tax-free growth moving forward. So obviously you have to have earned income up to that point to be able to do so. And you also can't make too much money, or you could look at that backdoor Roth IRA I mentioned, but be aware if you have other IRAs or simples or anything else that could cause what we call cream in the coffee there. So just be aware of that, how that works from a planning standpoint. But those are some solutions. Or maybe you are still working, you have a Roth 401k option, maybe you're not maximizing that. Well, you can put in up to, I can't remember the limits exactly for 2025, we'll pop them on the screen here, but it could be over $30,000 to contribute to your Roth 401k if you're over age 50. And then obviously, as you know, the new rules, if you're 60 to 63 or 61 to 63, the new odd rules where you can even contribute a little bit more for that because of the catch-up rules that currently exist. And so because of all that, you're going to have an opportunity to stuff more there, take the after-tax money, move it to the tax-free. And then the third opportunity you have here with this taxable bucket is use that money to pay for Roth conversion tax, right? If we want to convert $100,000, we may have to pay $20,000 in taxes. And where is that money going to come from? If we're over 59.5, we could withhold that money from our investments, but if we do that, we don't get as much over to the Roth. So maybe we reposition this money. Now we can get more over to the Roth. We don't have to worry about the other limits that we talked about, and could be a way to better position the three buckets that we've talked about here today. So hopefully this video was helpful for you to get a grasp of what you should be looking at doing with the 3 buckets, the tax diversification. Like I said, all your life you've been told investment diversification, but how about diversifying the taxes versus having that imbalance that we talked about earlier? So I hope this information was helpful for here today. And if you are the type of person that watches this video and you feel like I'm talking to you and this is the exact type of planning you're looking for, feel free to schedule a 15-minute call with our team, and you can do so in the description below. And basically what that will look like is you'll be able to meet with our team here, and we'll be able to see if we could be a good fit. And then if so, we'd schedule another session to explore further and look to make a decision in that next session to work together or not. I do always want to be transparent. I always try to say this anytime I give this opportunity for people to meet with us. We do have a lot of people that reach out to us every single week, especially from our YouTube channel with how much this has grown. And so we do try to meet with everyone we can to make sure we can and see if they're a good fit. But we'll have you fill out a questionnaire to see if we could be a good fit before we even get on that call. And then if so, we'll explore further from there. But just want to be transparent. We can't bring on everyone that we meet with. We have more of a boutique feel here. We don't try to serve everyone. We really try to go deep with the clients we serve and have a lesser client to advisor ratio than many of the other advisors in the industry, just to make sure we can over deliver and have more of that family feel. So if you like that opportunity, feel free to schedule time. We'd love to talk with you. Again, $1 million or more with a pension, that's who we serve best, and we're looking forward to connecting with you there. So that's all I have on today's episode of Joe Knows Retirement. Enjoy the rest of your day.